One of the most frequent questions we get on this YouTube channel is, how do we do research for blog posts? See, I'm getting that question all the time. The thing is, it's our research that is one of the things that makes our content stand out, which is what makes it rank well and what keeps it ranking for a very long time. Now, in this video, I want to teach you, you know what, forget that. Forget the whole burying the lead thing. That's just dumb. You came here for original information and helpful information, so I'm going to give it to you. The secret to our research is original research, original content, unique, original, helpful value for our users. I use the word original a lot. The problem that a lot of bloggers have is we tend to replicate what's already out there and just make it a little better. That's called commodity content because it's easy to replicate. People could look at 5 different blog posts on the same topic and they'd pretty much get the same value no matter which one they went to. We want to do something better. We want to do the kind of research that's going to make our content stand out. Surface level research isn't going to cut it as we move forward. The competition's just too great and Google's getting too smart. So, how do we do it? When I say that it's one of the most misunderstood things we say, I'm not exaggerating at all. In the Ultimate Content Warrior Challenge, we asked bloggers to submit a blog post where they did original research. And we even gave them some tips on how to go about doing that. And still, we got a lot of content where they just missed the mark. In this video, I want to show you 6 specific ways that content creators are doing original research. And I want to show you examples of every single one of them. So let's dive in. The first is consolidating information already available on the web, but doing your own analysis. What I don't mean here is I'm doing a product review, and so I go to the manufacturer's website and get all the specs. I go to Amazon and pull some of the features they say, and maybe even some of the information from the reviews, and I put it in a nice table. That table looks a lot like the table that's on the manufacturer's website, and it looks an awful lot like the list of specs given on Amazon. It doesn't come across as original content. It's not really original research. A couple rules of thumb for original research. If I could easily find the same information in 10 seconds of Googling, it's not original research, it's not original content. Likewise, if another blogger could replicate what you did in under an hour, it's probably not original research and original content. Obviously, I'm assuming that they didn't just like copy and paste your article, but short of that, they shouldn't be able to replicate it that easily. If they can, you've created commodity content. I want to show you a couple examples of where somebody consolidated information from the web, but did it in a way that they added their own analysis. The first one here is someone who has an article about where to go to get your own blood test. I want blood work done, I want to know my cholesterol or whatever, but I don't want to go get a physical with my doctor. I just want to order the dang blood test, right? So they have found all the information about the different labs or the different services that offer this. They found out what labs they use, which is important, by the way, for insurance purposes in a lot of places. How many different tests they offer, just so that you can get an idea. If I want an obscure test, I should probably go to one of these that has a lot of options, as well as some other notes. Now, this isn't perfect. I would love to see a little bit more information in a table like this. You're a little bit limited in WordPress on tables. They just get super wide and they don't look good if you add too much information. But I'd love to know which of all of these have an at-home option where they'll send me a kit. I can do it myself and mail it in. They also put together a small table of price comparisons for the different labs for a few different blood tests. What would take this a step further? If instead of just doing a small amount of this, they generated kind of a database of all the different tests available and how much they cost at these different places. That would take a long time, and it's probably something you'd populate over time. But if you could take that and put it into a little tool here where I select which blood test I want and it tells me which labs offer it and how much each of them charge, that would be extremely useful. And even potentially a link to where I can go order that blood test. It'd be awesome. This is someone who's written an article about what to look for when buying a scooter. It's a buyer's guide, but they've taken it a step further. They have pulled in all of the different elements that you should look for when buying a scooter. What size engine do you want? What style do you like? What kind of brakes do you want? Lots of different things. And they've explained in the article how to decide what you want. And then they've made a spreadsheet of a whole bunch of different scooters with all of the information about all of them and a neat little video to walk you through how to use the spreadsheet so that you can filter that list and end up with a small list of only the scooters that meet your criteria. So now you know, I want one of these. That's awesome. That's super helpful and that's unique. Somebody else would have to do a lot of work to generate something similar, like you did. You did a lot of work, but by doing the legwork, you create a certain barrier of entry that prevents a lot of other people from creating the type of content. It's no longer a commodity. Somebody else is gonna have to do a lot of work to be able to replicate it. The next way that we create original content is by running an experiment. This is a lot of fun. Sometimes we do this for a product review where we just want to run an experiment. We want to see, how hot does this product get if I use it continually? Like how long do I have to use it for it to get too hot or whatever? Or it just depends on what the product is, but you run an experiment. This person wrote an article about, do 3D printers use a lot of power? Now notice they didn't say how much power do 3D printers use. That comes into play here in a minute. First of all, he talks about that he's gonna do an experiment, but he gives you the answer pretty well up front. He tells you basically what the specs are, and then tells you, I ran an experiment and here's what I found. I mean, right here in bold, boom. The average power draw over an hour was 189.52 watts, which is lower than they were expecting. They ran the experiment, and this is where it just doesn't have to be that complicated. All they did was they took their 3D printer that they already have, that they already blog about, they plugged it into a watt tester. It's just testing how much power consumption is being used at that time, plugged it into the wall, set an hour-long test, and then had it read every few seconds. And it just, boop, takes a reading. Then when they're done, they can just analyze that data, just take an average even, and find out what was the average power consumption. And then they took it even a step further. Notice that the main question that they're trying to answer isn't how much power do they use? It's do they use a lot of power? So then they took that and they compared that to readily available information on the web, a whole bunch of other different household appliances. Here's how much a space heater uses. Here's how much a ceiling fan uses. And you can see, relatively speaking, how much power 3D printer uses compared to other appliances. Compared to my desktop computer, it's pretty well on par, especially if I have a powerful desktop computer. Compared to a microwave, man, that 3D printer is not using a lot of power. It's pretty cool. It's actually answering the question very well. And then they go even further and say, here's how much power actually costs normally for most people. And so therefore, here's how much it's costing you to run your 3D printer from an electricity standpoint. They have answered the question thoroughly, and they've done it in a way that for somebody else to be able to replicate, they're going to have to do something like this, their own experiment. And again, it's original content that the Me Too guys are never going to take the time to do. The next one is doing a product review. I alluded to experimenting. I want to show you an example. In this video on Channel Makers, Nate compares a whole bunch of lights. These are RGB lights. They're a common thing that a lot of YouTubers are using today. Well, instead of just saying, hey, here's how to use an RGB light, he's like, I'm going to try a product comparison. So he bought 9 of them, the 9 most popular ones he could find on the internet. Then he tested them all. He ran several different experiments. He was able to see how long does the battery last. Well, that's pretty easy to test. Charge them all up, set them all to the same settings, turn them on, and put a camera on them. And look at the timestamp on the camera of when each one went out. And now you know how long the battery lasts and how they compare to each other. Very, very simple. You're able to use an app to see how accurate the color temperature is. When it says it's 5,500 Kelvin, what is it really? You can use an app to see what the brightness is. There's so many different things you can test very simply by just having a smartphone or by setting it up and just running a test like the battery life. And in the end, Nate can definitively say, these 8, nobody should buy. These 3 are the ones that you should potentially buy depending upon the specific criteria that matter the most to you. It's an awesome product comparison, and very few people are going to put in the effort to make Me Too types of content when you've done that level of research. The next one is actually a step easier, and that's to do an interview. Now, there are right ways and wrong ways to use an interview in a blog post. It's okay to do a blog post where the whole post is basically the interview, as long as it's something that the content of the interview and the person being interviewed are something that people would want to search, or that if they saw that, posted on social media or something, they would really want to click on it. What I saw in the Ultimate Content Warrior Challenge was that, but where the person being interviewed, not as well known, or maybe only really, really well known in the small circle of people. And the content of the interview was just kind of about their life and their career and how they got into what they're doing. That isn't something that very many people would look for. And so it's not going to work, right? Instead, if there were specific purposes for the interview, if you wanted to write blog posts about specific topics that this person talks about in their interview, and then use quotes from that interview to add credibility to your blog post, specific quotes from this person who's this expert in this field and does this thing, it's original content that other people would have a hard time replicating unless they found a similar expert and went and did that interview. So here's how someone did it, and they did it really well. This is an article about dew claws on dogs, which I don't actually know what that is, which goes to show that I don't know enough about dogs apparently, and whether or not you should remove them. Now this person, they did an interview, probably in the form of email or maybe even a survey, but it's structured as an interview in the blog post where they asked some specific questions from professionals, from veterinarians. And based upon their results, their responses, they were able to write a blog post with pretty definitive answers. The reason they could be so definitive is they didn't just ask one vet's opinion. They asked 4. And when they got the responses from 4 vets, now you have an article where you're like, you know what? Basically, those 4 vets agreed on these things. I should probably listen to what they had to say. That article is way more credible than when somebody says, hi, I'm a blogger who owns a dog, and here's what I think about dew claw removal. It's just that much more definitive and that much more substantive, and therefore original and valuable. The next one can be really easy to do as well, and you don't need a huge audience to do that, and this is to do surveys or polls. Now, if you have an audience, that's fantastic. We love to do these because we're able to aggregate a large amount of data from a group of people who have a similar background and similar interests to find out some piece of information. And we can aggregate data and generate our own statistics. It's fantastic when you have that. If you don't have your own audience though, it's not that hard. You can go to Facebook, you can go to Reddit or whatever. You might, depending on the groups you're in, you might get away with actually doing a poll. But if not, just post a question. Go into a Facebook group for people that are into your niche and go ask a question. And then take all the responses that you get, put them into a spreadsheet or something, and then group the ones that are similar and find the trends, find the data. And from that, you've got a survey, right? Maybe you ask 3 or 4 questions and you just aggregate the responses in groups. And now you have great data. It's awesome when you can show graphs and tables and things to show here is what people think about this, or here is the experience people have. One way that people did this that was wrong in the Ultimate Content Warrior Challenge is that they did the survey, but the question they asked was basically like, which of these factors are you worried the most about? And then they wrote their article. All the subheadings are based on those factors, but all the information in the blog post is just what they came up with themselves. Well, that's not really that much better. It doesn't actually help me as a reader to be more confident in the responses that you gave me as the author. Instead, what you want to do is get that information from those people and use that in the meat of your content. Here's somebody who did a really good job of that. This one is all about microgreen grow lights, and they surveyed a bunch of people who use microgreen grow lights. They asked them questions like, how many watts do you use per shelf in your setup? And they got all these awesome responses. And they found that, you know what, most people are using 40 watts. Great, that's great to know. And he's able to do some analysis on that and figure out, you know what, most of the experts are using this, but the people who use 80 watts, based on some of their other answers, here's why they did that. And he's got great information to share in the blog post that's not just from his experience, but from the experience of many other people. Now, he asked a lot of other questions about what light frequencies you should use, what types of lights are working well. And again, sometimes a survey is more valuable even than one expert's opinion, because what you're finding out is this huge group of people, Many of them have been doing this for a long time and tried many different things before settling in on what worked best. And now I get the wisdom of that whole group to be able to put into my blog post and come up with really good definitive answers. The next one is just expert knowledge. Now, it may seem really hard to become an expert in a field. You may feel like I need to have made that my career to be able to have expert knowledge. I want to show you an example of where that is just not the case. Here's someone who wrote a blog post about the top 10 attraction parks in the Netherlands. This is someone who has raised kids all the way from childhood all the way up to now like adulthood. And he has been to all the parks many times with his kids. And the article has this table here that just talks about like what age of kids is this park best for. Well, he's able to pretty definitively say what this is because his different kids who have different opinions about things, at certain ages, this park was no longer interesting to them. I've been to all of them so many times, I just know. And then the ticket price he's able to grab easily just off of the web. As you read through the blog post, it becomes very, very apparent that he has very in-depth knowledge of each of these parks that he could only have gained by spending time there with his family. And so, in this thing that just over the course of several years he's gained experience in, he's an expert, and no one else is going to be able to provide that level of information. If you don't have that expert knowledge, that's okay. I've given you 5 other ways that you can go do original research, and you can gather that expert knowledge either from experts, from group knowledge, from doing your own experiments. There are just so many ways to gather really good original information that other people are going to have a hard time replicating, so they're not going to take the time to do it. So that's it. You want to know how we do research for blog posts? It's not about, well, I spend 15 minutes doing this, and then I spend 12 minutes on the outline, and it's not that. It's not that at all. What it is thinking about what is the best way for me to be able to provide original value for this specific topic. What is the original content that I could add to this blog post that would make it very hard to replicate? It's going to make it original. And then going out and finding a way to get a hold of that information so that it's totally original, but super valuable.